and welcome to Beaverdale Books. Thanks so much for coming for tonight's book talk and for being patient with our little renovation here. Before we begin, I want to mention a few of our upcoming events. On Tuesday, May 19th at 6:30, Tim Bascom will share his book, The Boundless Game, just in time for soccer fans. We are also looking forward to Christopher A. Miklos on Thursday, May 28th at 6:30. He's going to do a very fun talk about his book, which is titled Tick Town. And yes, it is about an invasion of giant ticks. And I wish I had the book because the cover is just hilarious. So it looks like a B-movie giant ticks. You can find all the details on our website, or you can pick up an event list at our front counter, which is actually our side counter right now. Now on to tonight's book, Everyday Extraordinary. Although the author's arguments may put a damper on the fun that often accompanies researching strange phenomena, Barry Markovsky's new book, Everyday Extraordinary, creates an engaging exploration of both the supernatural and the mundane. Barry is a social psychologist who has been lucky to have enjoyed a long career full of exciting research projects on such topics as networks, power, status, justice, and how people influence one another's perceptions and beliefs. And for the last few years, he has backed off academic publishing and focused instead on writing for everyday people. In 2020, he retired from his job as a sociology professor and moved to Western North Carolina, where he writes and hikes and plays music and cooks and socializes and lives to his heart's content. Please join me in a warm welcome for Barry.
How's the sound? Good. Well, I can't stand in front of such an intimate group, so I'm going to sit here and I'm going to read you some things to give you a taste of the book. Maybe first a little bit about me, which leads into how the book came about. I never really expected to write a trade book. This actually exists now. I still can't really believe it. I've published lots of stuff before that's academic, which is just very different. So, well, first, thanks to Janet, thanks to Beaverdale Books for hosting this. Thanks to my partner, Jerry, who traveled out here with me and made the trip fun. And thanks to everybody who showed up tonight. So I'm going to give you a little preamble to the book, and at Jerry's direction, I've shortened it a bit. Because professors love talking about themselves. My first job.
Is the mic on?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Oh, yeah. Just a little closer. There you go.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
My first real job was a couple hours down the road at University of Iowa. And I was 26 when I accepted their offer, and I kind of grew up there personally and professionally. I was there for 18 years before going to the University of South Carolina. But truth be told, I was planning my getaway from Iowa even before I got here. I was coming from beautiful, temperate Palo Alto, California. I was in grad school at Stanford. And the day I interviewed at the University of Iowa was 2 degrees below zero. Oh. And I was wearing a light sweater and a sports coat, because that's all I had. And then the day I moved in, that subsequent August, it was, the heat index was 135. So it just all validated my desire to get a better job. But turned out it was a great job, and I easily stayed there 18 years and could have stayed there longer.
What department were you in?
Sociology.
Okay.
And sociology department in South Carolina made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and I had an opportunity to take what I had learned about department building in Iowa from senior faculty and apply that in a new department and help build up South Carolina. And I was there for 19 years before I left. I want to say that while unloading the moving van in Iowa City, my new neighbor who came over, introduced himself, he gave me cold drinks because it was ungodly hot. And that was my first taste of Iowa nice. And my department welcomed me as a full-fledged citizen, as opposed to the too young fledgling that I actually was. Also at Iowa, the graduate students were every bit as good as the grad students I was with at Stanford University. And the undergraduates were probably better than the Stanford undergraduates. We had, at least in those years, the 80s, we had like #1, #2 public education system in the country in Iowa. I don't know if it's held up over the years. No.
Nope.
But it was great for us. We had great students.
Sad to hear.
Now about the book. So the seeds of this book were planted, I calculated, about 64 years ago. I was about 6 years old, and I just discovered screwdrivers in my dad's toolbox in the basement. And I wondered a lot about how things worked, so I learned how to unscrew things and take things apart, and I did that with toys and radios and clocks, and leaving a string of disabled devices and spare parts in my wake. I was just a curious kid, and they really didn't try to stifle that, which was nice too. I also wondered how cars work, and my dad was a machinist in the back warehouse of Framingham Motor Parts in Massachusetts, where I grew up. And he was, once in a while, he was able to let me tag along and watch what he did back there, grinding crankshafts and cylinder heads and stuff. I learned about blue-collar work from a very young age. I learned about music because I wanted to be a Beatle, and I learned guitar and played in bands. It was the space age. I built model rockets. I learned everything I could about the Mercury and Gemini and Apollo programs. I had a beginner's telescope so I could see craters on the moon and inside my neighbor's windows. I took summer science programs in middle school with field trips and saw all kinds of amazing things. And in my classes, I was learning how trees work and how flowers work and chemicals and animals and DNA. College and grad school were mainly about how people work and how groups work. Psychology, sociology, anthropology, and also a lot of research methods and statistics and math, none of which I was gifted at, but I worked really hard and I enjoyed it. So a major thread running through this book traces back to a course I took in grad school with one of my mentors. In fact, he was chair of my dissertation committee. It was about the logic of science and how to develop scientific theories. I learned that science is built around detecting and correcting errors. And there's nothing else like that we know. Most people, most groups want to preserve a belief system. Scientists want to overthrow theirs, make it better. Out with the old and in with the new. And that really appealed to me. I also, in learning about scientific theories, I learned that they're the real heart of science, not the technology, not even the research, but the research is feeding into the theories, our broader and deeper understanding of the world around us. But before you get to call something a scientific theory, it's already survived many, many rigorous tests, attempts to prove it wrong. And if it survives those, it's a stronger theory. It's not our usual attitude. We're looking for ways to confirm what we believe is true rather than try to disconfirm it. And that plays a part in a lot of beliefs that the book addresses. Other than some members of the Boston Red Sox, my heroes have always been science popularizers. Like, I have a list here. All these people influenced me through their books. Carl Sagan, Stephen Hawking, Stephen Jay Gould, Isaac Asimov, Richard Dawkins, Bill Nye, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Bryson, Mary Roach. Neil deGrasse Tyson has a couple really pithy quotes. He says, "Science makes you avoid fooling yourself into thinking something is true when it isn't, or that something isn't true when it is." He also said that the great thing about science is it's true whether or not you believe it. And it's a shame that in our culture people find it okay to believe something is true only because it feels true or because they want it to be true. Again, not like science. Back in grad school, I was driving near San Francisco one evening and I heard a guy named Andrew Fracknoy on a talk radio show. He was the director of the Astronomical Society Pacific, an astronomer. And he was talking about why astrology fails as a science. In some detail, what was wrong with astrology that makes it non-scientific, or in fact, a pseudoscience. And that term became part of my vocabulary for the first time. Pseudoscience, what an interesting thing to examine. The next morning, on his suggestion, I subscribed to a journal called The Skeptical Inquirer. And I read the issue. I was in the library, I sent in my subscription form, and 45 years later, I still subscribe to that publication, and you should too. It's really, really interesting. And grad school was very amazing for me. It gave me a foundation that generalizes across fields. It wasn't just in sociology, an understanding of logic and experimental design and statistics and the nuances and problems that arise whenever you try to understand people and to study them. And it's people that really are the focus of this book. 18 extraordinary claims, all involving either myself, something I experienced, or people I know that told me their stories. And the approach is generally like this. Somebody experiences or claims something that is beyond remarkable, if it's true. And okay, that's great. It could be supernatural. That's the approach I take. It could be. We can't necessarily rule that out, but let's investigate it. Let's look at it more closely and see if there are maybe some non-obvious natural explanations for these supernatural types of claims. And every chapter does this. The book also goes into why most people will happily defend beliefs that are either unproven or proven to be false, especially about really important things. And I try to address that as much as possible. It talks about what happens in our minds, what happens in our relationships and in our cultures that make us accept unfounded claims. And I think that's important. People tell me all the time, well, so what if I believe in ghosts, or if I read my astrology
horoscope.
Thank you. I kept thinking my astrology sign, my horoscope every day, or go to an astrologer and have my chart written. What's the harm in that? And I mostly agree with them. Most of it is harmless, but the analogy I would use is we drive all the time. It's harmless. We don't get hurt. We don't hurt anybody. And yet we have airbags and seatbelts in the car because there is some small rate at which things go wrong. And with any false belief, there is a possibility that you may go wrong. You may make a bad decision. You may get taken advantage of, and so on. So there's a lot of cautionary tales in the book. And I mean, some of the harms that I discuss, not in great detail, it's generally a positive book, but the harms can be physical, psychological, moral, social, emotional. So finally, I want to be clear that the book is written for regular people, as Jen pointed out, not for other scientists. I worked hard to make the stories easygoing and the science fun. I think it is. But I stood on the shoulders of several pages of acknowledgments worth of other people who helped in their own ways with this, especially a little international writers group that I lucked into, 5, 6 people, and I met with them weekly for 2 years virtually on Zoom, and we gave each other feedback. None of them were nonfiction writers, So their perspective on, the emotional content of the writing was so useful to me, and I was able to make that transition from academic writing, where I had some success, to a more popular kind of writing. I think it's much easier, much more accessible than anything I used to write and publish in journals. Also, a friend, Kathy Sheldon, she's an Iowa Writers Workshop alum, and she happens to live in Asheville, where I live, and met her, and one day I showed her a list of about 25, 30 chapter titles, potential chapter titles, things I thought I might be able to write about. And the titles were funny, and she said, "You gotta go with this, you gotta do something with this." That was about a year after my retirement, and I was looking for something fun to do, so that was the start of it. Finally, the two most important women in my life who are both here tonight, my daughter, Tess Markovsky, who pops in on several chapters in various disguises, by name, and Jerry Seymour, again, my partner to whom the book is dedicated, and I love you both. Nice to have you here in front of me. Now for some excerpts. So this first one is from the introduction to the book, and it's a little bit dry, but it really tells you, if you're potentially interested in reading this, what you're in for. The book's title implies that extraordinary events, like thinking you might have seen a ghost, are commonplace, but what makes them seem extraordinary is usually a matter of inexperience with the phenomenon, or a lack of familiarity with its possible causes. The following chapters are chronological, and each opens with an extraordinary phenomenon described in a front stage section. Each is a true story about an eerie incident, uncanny coincidence, bizarre claim, or other wondrous event. It may be something I personally experienced or observed, or that was told to me by others who experienced it directly. I'll apply some creative license to fill gaps in conversations and contexts, and I'll alter the names of some of the people still living. Otherwise, the descriptions stick closely to my recollections. Around half of the earlier stories involve different kinds of religious claims, from Santa Claus to miracles. It's not that I have an axe to grind and need to debunk religious beliefs. Rather, it's that so many of the eerie, bizarre, uncanny, and magical claims I was exposed to in my younger days were connected to my own or to others' religions. After each story's front stage section is a peek backstage, it invites you to see the claim from a vantage point that pokes and prods it, considers alternative explanations, and accounts for it in down-to-earth terms. The explanations will often surprise and delight you, as they did me when I first learned about them. My favorite writers are so interesting and entertaining that I'm largely unaware of how much I learn from them while I'm reading. We'd all be lifelong students if only school were more like their books. I try to capture some of that spirit in these pages. There are no academic prerequisites, and later chapters don't depend on earlier ones, should you want to skip around. Yes, here and there you'll encounter bits of physics, social science, physiology, and so on, but I make a little science go a long way. If you're a seasoned skeptic, you'll notice a kinder and gentler brand of debunking than you've likely encountered before. You might even find the approach useful when offering your skeptical perspective to those who are skeptical of your skepticism. If you have unshakable beliefs in one or more of the claims that I examine, I hope you'll feel both challenged and respected. And I may poke some fun if there's obvious fun to be poked. But always it's to inform and entertain, never to mock or embarrass. I'm simply offering perspectives, explanations, and evidence you may not have seen before. And I'm grateful to anyone willing to look and consider. Over the years of reading and teaching these subjects, I've heard all the reasons people give for and against their validity. I've always approached each topic with an open mind as I learned more about it. But as wiser people have recommended, my mind was not so open that my brains fell out. A claim warrants a closer look when, if it were true, it would be unprecedented, nonsensical, or in violation of physics. Even more so when it has important consequences for the believer's health, finances, and relationships. With any extraordinary claim, most people fall between the extremes of true believer and dyed-in-the-wool skeptic. But just being moderate in your belief may not be very satisfying. Maybe you're skeptical about astrology or ghosts, but can't back up your position when you're confronted by a believer. Or maybe you feel that some of the ESP or UFO cases you've heard about are plausible, but you haven't seen a rigorous analysis done by trained researchers. I've written this book for you, one who may not be squarely on the fence, but at least you can see the fence from where you sit. You may assume of me, this guy is so biased, he thinks science explains everything. The approach I take is scientific skepticism, and whether or not it warps judgments and closes minds is a very reasonable question to raise. Of course, I've thought about that a lot. Ethically and practically, before I publish anything, I have to consider the possibility that I'm deluding myself. Maybe science as a whole is self-deluded. But the chances are reduced because, unlike any other belief system ever invented, science has built-in safeguards against bias. Also, scientists are anything but closed-minded about what's possible. All major theories in science at one time went against the accepted wisdom. It can take time, but when evidence accumulates against even the most firmly held beliefs in science, it eventually lets go of the old and ushers in the new. On a more personal level, I'd love to be the first to demonstrate beyond a doubt that ESP works, or astrology has predictive power, or our planet is being visited by extraterrestrials. Many mainstream scientists feel the same. Our institutions reward us for out-of-the-box discoveries. I have to be open, at least a little, to the possibility that people who claim to cure diseases with vibrations or talk to dead ancestors can really do so. But to move my belief meter's needle from unlikely to likely, a claim must be supported with both a logical explanation and solid, repeatable evidence. So yes, I'm biased. I'm biased against believing illogical claims, as well as any claim that lacks good evidence. What about the argument that scientists think they can explain everything? Honestly, any scientist saying such a thing would have to be a fool. Every day, science explains more than it did the day before and shows no signs of slowing down. This proves that there's always more to explain. Science moves forward, it improves, but it's never finished. Conducting tests and interpreting results requires some professional training. So does distinguishing good research from bad. If you want to get to the bottom of an extraordinary claim, plunging into a Google rabbit hole isn't the same as doing a competent literature review. Do-it-yourself research of any kind is never advisable without appropriate skills in research methods and, very often, statistics. It generally isn't obvious when a proponent of nonsense lacks research skills or a scientific disposition. It's easier than you might think to sound authoritative while spouting rubbish. I may be doing it right now. This book won't solve all misinformation problems. I do hope it provides a few cautionary tales while fostering healthy skepticism and critical thinking skills. In the following chapters, I'll serve as your helmsman, helping you navigate the vast and choppy oceans of astonishing claims. That was from the introduction. Next, I'm going to read just the front stage section of chapter 10, which is called ESP, Can It Be? It starts with an epigraph quoting Robin Williams about those TV ads that used to be on for dial-up psychics. He said, if it's the psychic network, why do they need a phone number? So this took place very near here. This is the front stage part. I'll read a little intro. One wintry Midwestern weekend, I set out early in the morning to spend the day at the big fair 2 hours away. Not the famous Iowa State Fair with its life-size butter cow and batter-fried Oreo cookies on a stick. That one's at the opposite time of year, in the humidity-soaked days of summer. No, I'm going to the big psychic fair in Des Moines, Iowa. Its full title is the All Iowa Holistic and Psychic Extravaganza. Now, skipping ahead, I looked around the main floor of the fair and found a psychic who seemed interesting and not too expensive. Dave the psychic. My turn finally arrives and I take my seat across from Dave. Though I'm a little shy, he quickly puts me at ease. Hello there, what's your name? He asked, smiling. I so desperately wanted to reply, you're the psychic, you tell me. But not wanting to get off on the wrong foot, I chose a less snarky path. Barry, what's yours? I asked back, making it obvious I'm staring over his shoulder at his huge Dave the Psychic sign. He gets it, chuckles, then begins with a soothing voice. So Barry, this is simple. No gimmicks, no tea leaves or crystal balls. I use my 5 senses and my second sight. He makes air quotes when he says second sight, saying whatever that is. I appreciate the self-deprecation. He continues. With these tools, we'll exchange energy and get into sync. You'll feel yourself relax a little, but don't worry. It's not hypnosis or anything like that. Your heart and mind will let down their guards and tell me a story. I'll read it back to you as it unfolds before me. Some of it may resonate perfectly. Other parts might seem confusing or surprising. The more you remain open, the better the chances we'll reveal some truths. Sound okay? Absolutely, I replied. All right, Barry, let's begin. Trying to relax, I pull my padded folding chair closer to the table and lean back into it. Dave readies himself with some slow, deep breaths. His eyes do this weird thing, rolling up in his skull while his lids flutter for a few seconds. He slumps back in his chair, his hands in his lap, and his gaze now fixed on me. A long, silent minute passes. Are you recovering from an injury? He asks. No, I don't think so. But I sense something in your leg, your knee. I see you limping. Not today, but I sense a limp. A scar, a past injury? Oh, yes, I tore my knees up good last fall in the gravelly softball field in Coralville. They're always bandaged and scabby, still not healed. You can see that? I see something, but now I'm getting something else, something more important. You're worried, he declares. Is it your family? Yes, probably. Your marriage. He's scanning me intently. I can feel my eyes open wider in anticipation. Feels positive. But there's a child. You've got one that's teenage around? That's right, 12. Yeah, at that age, the boys are still all goofy and innocent, but the girls are starting to try to grow up too fast, right? Oh man, so true. You've got a girl. Uh-huh. Older boys are showing interest. You want to protect her, but you don't want to smother her, to dim her light. He trails off. But there's also something happening at work that worries you. You're a professional, special training, a lot invested. Now you see some people leapfrogging over you, maybe not fully deserving. Does this make sense? It brings to mind all my rejected article submissions to journals, while at the same time, they publish all sorts of shoddy work. Publications advance careers, so yeah, in a way, it does sometimes feel like being left behind. I'm only human. Definitely, I tell Dave. Don't let that get to you. Sometimes things seem unfair on the surface, but there's a bigger picture. Those people pay the price. Some of them hate their jobs or alienate loved ones. Some waste valuable time in turf battles. Does this make sense? It does. I sense the clock running, so I ask, can we switch topics? Of course, Barry, anything. I miss my mom and dad. How do I deal with that? Will it get any easier? Losing a parent is incredibly tough, he says comfortingly. Losing both can be devastating. You feel disconnected sometimes, incomplete, but it makes you appreciate your connections with your partner and your daughter. Any other kids? No. Cherish your little girl. Cherish both the females in your life and all the truly valuable things. The memories of your parents. I see them in a good place. I sense them through you. I sense their pride and love, although they may not have told you enough. He's right that my parents weren't expressive toward me. Sometimes one of their friends or a relative would tell me how much mom or dad went on and on about how proud they were of me and the way I was turning out. That was enough for me. For better or worse, their parents raised them that way. And I may have overcompensated the other way with my daughter, showering the poor girl with love at every opportunity, whether or not she wants it. And that's why, with the clock running out and Dave making me think about parents, love, and children, I get misty. A tear forms at the corner of my eye and rolls down my cheek. From all appearances, I look like any other emotionally satisfied customer, except I'm not. Dave confirmed all my suspicions. He was an obvious fraud. You'll have to read them. backstage parts. There are a lot of clues in
Keep
there.
going.
One of them being that my parents were very much
Alive.
But anyway. So I also wanted to give you a flavor of a backstage section. And Jerry made me dump the one I read last night at Prairie Lights in Iowa City. And
I can't even remember what it was now.
That's how much you loved it. But I'm going to do a little excerpt from another chapter. This is called, the chapter's called UFO. And the background of the chapter is that all the kids in the neighborhood, 5 or 6 of us, built a fort in my backyard because we got all these fence posts and rusty nails that we could put together. And as soon as it was ready, we all went to our parents to ask if we could sleep out at night. None of us had ever done this before. We were about 12. And the only ones who were able to get permission were my friend Jeff and myself. A lot of us kids were sky-oriented in the 1960s. We took the word of astronomers who earlier in the century squinted through crude telescopes and believed they could see canals on Mars. We saw their drawings on TV and in books, seemingly unassailable evidence of an alien civilization. Somehow we missed the news that better telescopes and several recent Mars probes proved there were no canals. I was as obsessed with UFOs as I was with bottle rockets, war games, and monster movies. Even before I read any skeptical literature, I was growing suspicious that news of sightings and encounters may have been overblown. It always struck me how most of the pictures of UFOs were terrible. As for the better ones, why were there never 2 or more of the same spacecraft? A shiny metal ship with beaming colored lights is hovering over the town, an event of unimaginable historical significance. But every single time, there's only ever exactly one person who snaps exactly one fuzzy photo of it on their $17 Kodak Instamatic. Robert Schaefer called this the shyness effect and illustrated its absurdity with a real event. On October 10th, 1972, an unexpected, short-lived object from outer space appeared over sparsely populated areas of the western United States and Canada. Despite the suddenness, brevity, old technology, and population sparseness, there was extensive photographic and motion picture evidence from different vantage points, allowing the UFO to be identified. It was a meteor. But the UFO I watched in the sky on that summer night of my tweenhood was no meteor. It was and is probably always, it was, is, and probably always will be unidentified. I say this with some confidence because even one of the world's top skeptical UFO experts, Mick West, couldn't say for sure what it was based on my description. I wasn't surprised though, because my only evidence was a half-century-old memory of a nondescript point of light observed by a young boy with no special knowledge of the subject. Had I known what to look for in my backyard that night, and had I recorded everything, if not with a high-quality video camera, at least with pencil and paper, then I might be able to guess more confidently today, or at least to have given Mick West more to work with. But I can't even pin down the date or the time of day. Probably late June, probably 11 at night, but both may be way off. I also might have more accurately noted the thing's behavior. What direction was it? How many degrees across the sky did it traverse? And how high was it above the horizon? What constellations were nearby? Was it constant in brightness? Did it change colors? How long between reversals of direction? That's why we noticed it. It was slowly going back and forth in the sky. The size-distance problem is a major sticking point, too. Given an unfamiliar object, you can't judge its distance without knowing its size, and vice versa. But the human brain resists accepting such ambivalence. It tries to infer both size and distance by making assumptions based on visual cues, memories, or expectations. Those inferences can be wickedly misleading. What I saw may have been multiple lights close together at a great distance, members of a flying club moving in formation, for example. Or there may have been one small, dim light very close by. Nick suggested a Chinese lantern wafting in the breeze. I have 2 different explanations that I think are more plausible. First option, an advertising blimp with lighted signs. There used to be a lot more of them, flying day and night, with many known cases of them being reported to police as UFOs. Far enough away, late enough in the evening, a blimp sign is reduced to a single point of light against a dark sky. A typical flight pattern would take it back and forth over a crowd, a horse racing track, for example, or other sporting event. The second possibility is an airplane. Here's where recalling one small detail makes a difference. I remember the object's general direction. So I looked at a map and considered my house's location and orientation. The UFO was due east, and I lived 21 miles due west of Logan International Airport. The light may have been a plane flying somewhere between me and Boston, shining its landing lights. Those lights are white, non-blinking, and visible for up to around 20 miles on a clear night. They're sometimes used for extra visibility and safety in busy airspaces. If it were a plane, why would it go back and forth? Search planes do that, but not typically at night. More likely, it was circling, and the back and forth movement was an optical illusion. It was too far away for us to see the standard red and green blinking wingtip lights, but close enough that fore and aft facing landing lights were always in view. Skipping ahead to the end of the chapter, I wrote an article on UFOs, or an encyclopedia entry some years ago for an encyclopedia of pseudoscience and paranormal things. Recently I reread my encyclopedia article on UFOs for the first time in probably a decade. I have the same conclusions now as I did then, so I might as well just quote it. The extraterrestrial hypothesis has found a stable niche in the ecology of public awareness. It's locked in the sense that there's a critical mass of believers and promoters, sufficient to recruit new adherents and to sustain interest over time. Because non-scientists do not feel a need for any higher standards of evidence, UFOs are likely to persist as a cultural phenomenon, even if proponents can amass no better evidence than that existing today. And that holds right up until today. Most paranormal experiences are illusory, but even knowing this, we can see them for what they are and really treasure them just the same. The sense of wonder that Jeff and I experienced that night during our 12th orbit of the sun was real, but it didn't make me leap to any baseless conclusions about extraterrestrials. Instead, it fed my desire to know more about the sky, the earth, and life. And I have one more bit. Just the epilogue from the book. I mean, a lot of people would skip over intros and epilogues, so this is something I want to say to people. Awe and wonder are irresistible pleasures. To fuel and deliver these addictive feelings, we build industries, institutions, organizations, and black markets. We engage as a culture with travel, art, music, film, religion, and psychotropic drugs. As individuals, we tickle our wonderment bones on the cheek by stargazing, walking in nature, curling up with a good book, or falling in love. It's less common to acquire these kinds of feelings by exploring their causes. In fact, it's popular to believe the opposite, that studying extraordinary claims and ultimately learning something from them negates all the fun. Obviously, I disagree. At least some people out there find the process and results of digging beneath the surface of an extraordinary claim even more wonderful and awe-inspiring than simply taking it at face value. And doing so has the nice side benefit of getting closer to the truth about what's really happening. Not everyone needs to feel this way, but I wish it were more widely known that there are exciting alternatives to unquestioning acceptance. I don't mean to imply you can't walk in both worlds. I may get some of my jollies from learning what's really going on with dowsing or UFO sightings, but I'm as vulnerable as the next person to the spine-tingling awesomeness of the night sky, a great museum, a hiking forest, an amazing song, an all-encompassing novel, and love. Supernatural stories are fun. Supernatural beliefs are too, but ought not to be mistaken for the natural world, which is already quite super without the adornment of myths and fallacies. And that's my review.
boomer. I'm a graduate from high school in 1972. In
74.
1968, at Kurtz High School, we had this amazing art teacher. And we talked about that summer, there was something in the moon that was different. Nobody knew what it was.
In the moon?
The moon. The moon was something different. And I don't know that we could see it differently, but we would, as teenagers or before teenagers, we would sit out in the backyards and look at the moon because it was different. And so I think of, I'm 72 right now, and listening to you, and during that 68, 69 time period, the things that we looked at that we thought were nothing, and I think about now, they were something.
Mhm.
And that's what you think.
Yeah, and 69 was quite a year. That was the moon.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Well, as soon as I had a conception of the moon as, a solid object that was somehow or other sticking close to the earth and going around, I started seeing it differently too. That concept of seeing things differently is throughout the history of science too. In the Copernican revolution, where we were no longer the center of the universe, but we were just going around the sun. It changed how you see sunsets and sunrises.
So there were so many children across the street. There were 4 children, there were 6 children, there were 8 children. In my family, there were 4 girls. And in the summertime, we sat out in that front yard and looked at the moon and what was different. What was different? What did we see?
Did you ever figure it out?
Who knows?
You wanted to see something different.
Yeah, so if baby boomers, how many baby boomers in this room? Some, few of us. But it was just, because we didn't start this anything with space travel. Obviously I remember the first time we were on the moon, but were we really on the moon? And so, as I listened to you and I started reading from the beginning of your books, it's like, I remember those times that we thought we knew everything and we didn't. You know that.
Do you think, kind of going on that line of that idea, is there an evolutionary benefit to sharing these stories amongst ourselves? Like, you don't have to be an expert, you can just sort of wonder what's out there, if there's UFOs or whatnot. And that brought you and your friend Jeff together in your book. Like she's talking about, that brought the neighborhood together. May not be true from a scientific perspective, but like if you think there's a UFO or something, but is there some value to that? Is that why these beliefs persist?
The angle that I have that very few other skeptical writers have is the social sciencey stuff. How we wouldn't come up with the concept of Martians with big eyes and green skin on our own, or very, very few people would. These ideas are coming to us from media, from our culture generally, but from a lot of different specific sources. And that tends to get overlooked. Most people who study these kinds of beliefs are psychologists, and they say, well, people believe things because they want to believe them, or they're motivated to believe them, or some kind of psychological explanation for it. But it's so natural to, when anything is ambiguous, to look to others for explanations and understanding. And if someone seems like they know what they're talking about, even if they don't, we latch onto that very, very readily. And this is like, I keep saying, cautionary tales. It's 18 different ways that happens, but step back a little and try to tolerate the ambiguity and the ambivalence for a while, and you learn a lot more that way. You don't have to jump to any kind of conclusion, paranormal or otherwise. Yes.
Hi, Dad. Two things unrelated. The first is, I think one of your favorite movies is Close Encounters of the
It's a good one.
Third. What about that book or that movie? Obviously, it's entertainment, but it happens to do with UFOs and aliens, and it actually happening in the movie. What drew you to that movie?
There are several movies like that. where what is so intriguing, there was one just a few years ago too, what's so intriguing about them is they're called close encounters of the third kind, where there is contact between people of Earth and people from some alien place. Contact, the movie was fantastic about this, where we received radio signals from space, decoded them, built a machine, and I don't want to give away the movie. Carl Sagan wrote the book, and the one more recently focused on language, and the hero is a female linguist. Does anyone remember this? And this spaceship had not landed, but was hovering, a huge spaceship hovering, and we were learning to communicate with them. It wasn't like they're coming to take us over or anything like that. They came in peace, but the difficulty was communication, as it would be. And they didn't have physical bodies the way we do. We never really saw what they were made of, I don't think. And I love that, because alien beings are not going to look like people slightly modified. They're going to be something unrecognizable if they exist, and I think they do. I mean, I would bet my life that somewhere up there's some kind of intelligent life, but I would also bet that it hasn't been here yet, and may never because of the distances involved. Yes, sir.
So my classmate was probably.
I was playing behind you.
Sorry.
A few years ago, less than 10 years ago, a whole bunch of scientists, astrophysicists, people like Carl Sagan and all, and got together and thought they were going to look at all the UFO sightings, which are not called UFOs anymore. What are they called?
UAPs.
The what?
UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena.
That's right. And they did a pretty thorough job of it, but at the end they admitted that there's about 6 or 7% that they could not explain. And these were scientists. These were people who looked at all the angles that you were talking about. They couldn't explain them.
Yeah, that term, inexplicable, can't explain, that can mean a few different things. And it could simply mean, and I think what it does mean in this case, is that there isn't sufficient data to identify the unidentified object. Everything that we've seen recently that's touted by the media as evidence for non-terrestrial spacecraft, or non-terrestrial vehicles, let's say, the famous Navy Nimitz videos with the Tic Tac seemingly zipping over the ocean. All of these things were initially unexplained until people who knew how to explain them tried. Now, they can't tell whether a particular object is, let's say, a toy balloon, a reflective balloon that's shining, or a bird that's flying slowly over the water. There's not enough information. But I can imagine when there's even worse information than what they have. I'm thinking of Nick West, who I mentioned earlier. He's totally debunked those Navy UFO videos, but that doesn't get press, that doesn't get publicized. But you're right, there have been 3 different government-sponsored summary analyses of all the UFO evidence of the time, and there's always a residual of about 5% that isn't explained. And of course, the people who are ufologists, UFO proponents, UAP people, they say, well, the government isn't telling us what we need to know to identify these. So it's just wide open to conspiracy theories. And, there's a chapter at the end of conspiracy theories too. But this is why I made the point at the end of the reading, just after the end of the reading, to be able to sit with uncertainty and wait till better evidence is available. It may never be, but that still doesn't give you license to lead to the conclusion that if we can't identify them, they must be from Mars or whatever.
Are other countries looking into this stuff?
I don't think to the extent that we are. Maybe they're more secretive about it. Ellen, did you want to? I mean,
Debbie.
So,
sorry.
so I would say this gentleman in my class is probably one of the smartest people I've ever known in my entire life. Went to MIT easily, and he questioned a lot of what was going on. And he, because we went to school from, a lot of us from kindergarten on, we lived in the same area. And we all listened to him. And even today, I think, what goes on in the moon? What goes on in outer space? What goes on out there? Because we really don't know. And so it's always interesting me, because I'm a baby boomer, what is really going on out there?
Have you noticed though that since the 70s, we've learned a lot about what's going on?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, the size of the known universe has
Right.
shifted as new information comes
Right.
in. The composition of planets and stars, the discovery in our
Right.
lifetimes that
Right.
virtually every solar system has, or about, it's estimated about half of the solar systems of other stars
Yeah.
have planets around them.
And part of it's really interesting, and part of it's really kind of scary. Because we really
I'm
don't
not
know,
scared.
you know?
Don't be scared.
And I'm thinking, what's going on? And I'm 72, so I'm thinking I may not have to worry about it.
No, we won't have all the answers in our lifetimes,
Right,
it's true.
right.
But again, learn to sit with that
Right.
and appreciate what we do know.
Oh no, don't forget. I don't know if this is relevant maybe, but I think there was a story you told me growing up about something that I did. Is that relevant? Sort of how our brains kind of latch on to.
Well, it shows how you can adopt a false belief.
Yeah,
based on
okay.
the flimsiest of evidence.
Yeah. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, I think people get mad at me.
Oh,
telling-
if I'm not mad, then
I know, that's what I tell them.
Yeah.
I don't think they believe me. No, and Tess was, what do you think, 6, 7?
I mean, for what I thought, this was when I was like 3 or 4, but
Maybe, you may have been that young. We lived in a house kind of in the country, and there were a lot of mice. And we had mouse traps around the house. This is in North Liberty, Iowa. And I was reading about false memory syndrome and how easy it was to implant false memories, especially therapists who at the time were implanting false memories of sexual abuse in children. And it was astounding, but it was ironclad research that showed this was happening. And therapists they were trying to dodge any responsibility for it, but it was really, all of this was coming out of their minds, not the children's minds. So I wanted to do a little experiment with Tess. Excuse me. And one day I said, oh, remember that time you caught your finger in the mousetrap and how much that hurt? And she said, no, I don't remember that. I said, oh yeah, it was last year, whatever. Excuse me, swallowed wrong. And that was it, I let it go. And maybe a week later, I said, do you remember which finger you caught in the mousetrap that time? And no, I don't remember. I said, I think it was one of those fingers, maybe. And let it go, we didn't pursue it. And then another week goes by, and I ratcheted up a little further, and I think I said, how much did it hurt when you caught your finger in the mousetrap? And she said, probably something like, well, it must have hurt a lot. I'm not sure. And this went on 1 or 2 or 3 more times. It didn't take very long, didn't take very much effort. But she was telling, in the end, she was telling me the story of how she caught her fingers in the mousetrap.
That was what he
An
said.
implanted memory. And I don't don't know if it was probably sometime before I told you.
Yeah, I mean, I was like in high school telling friends about this, and or I think maybe time had passed, and then I brought it up when I was older, and you were like, did I ever tell you that wasn't a thing? And I was like, what? So I wasn't angry. It's not abuse, I promise. It's not.
So informative to me.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's so interesting.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah.
I did nice things for her too.
Yes.
You ever find that people will make things, some extravagant story up to get something started? Some hoax?
Well, the thing I read last night that I didn't read tonight talks about some communication issues in the retelling of a story. How we tend to, the two terms are sharpen or level. We sharpen things. We try to think of what might be interesting to our listeners, whoever they may be. It's a very social phenomenon that the psychologists don't talk too much about. And in my case, it was an earthquake that happened when I was in California, and I had dreamt the night before, which is true, that there was going to be an earthquake. But so I told the story in the front stage section of the chapter, and I didn't read that to the audience. I told them the backstage part, which was that, well, this was when I was at Stanford for a year on a fellowship. Stanford campus is 2 miles from the San Andreas Fault, and not much further from the Hayward Fault, which is much more dangerous. I told them that I was having earthquake dreams about twice a month on average, and because there were about one feelable earthquake per month in that area, 3.0, 2.5, you could feel it. That the probability, which I calculated in a long footnote, the probability of me experiencing a precognitive dream, a dream that seemed to predict the earthquake, was 55% probably. So if there was one earthquake a month, I was dreaming about them twice a month. In the course of a year, there was a 55% chance that coincidence was going to happen. It was a predictable coincidence. In other words, you would bet on it if you had to make a bet, but it doesn't feel that way when you're in it. Retelling the story was an example of how I was picking out facts and exaggerating some of them, and also leveling or downplaying facts, like that we were so close to the San Andreas Fault to begin with, and there were lots and lots of earthquakes. So people do this it makes them feel good to tell a story that interests other people. I can attest to that.
Not to go too negative, but what are you most concerned about when it comes to harmful beliefs such as that you talked about in your book? I mean, what concerns you?
Medical.
Okay.
Yeah. Alternative medicines that, again, it's like the seatbelt thing. Most of the time, completely harmless, but there are people who, out of desperation or social influence, will take alternative medicine that has not been tested, not been clinically proven to be effective, in lieu of a treatment that has been clinically proven to be effective because it's being given by a conventional physician. So you're betting your life on that potential.
And backed up and hit your car. No, it didn't.
I'm not even a doctor, but I can read the research. I mean, there's a chapter in there about alternative medicine. It's the one where I went on like 2 days with a naturopathic doctor and asked her for the best evidence she has for some of the treatments that she was giving people. She's telling me it's all science-based. I said, okay, show me. And it was so clear. You didn't even have to be a scientist to read what the authors of these studies wrote, which was almost always they concluded more research is needed, don't do treatments on the basis of these results. But that was a little scary. I think the first line of the chapter said, she's very nice, but she may be killing people.
Did they ever figure out what those crop circles were?
Many of them, but again, there's some percentage that are unexplained. People have been caught doing those as hoaxes.
Oh, they've been caught?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a club in England that I used to show a video to classes where this little social club would go out and make the crop circles and just fool everybody. They'd make the news. The circles would make the news, and they developed some really cool techniques to do this. And they started getting elaborate, plotting them out ahead of time, mathematically. And,
Well, some of them are pretty cool, weren't they?
Yeah. But notice how that, lopped over into popular culture as a potentially alien phenomenon, not something that people could possibly have ever done.
I think most people believed it was extraterrestrial.
We never quite caught them.
Okay.
I don't even know what time it is, but thank you all for hanging.
Is it
around.
time?
Yeah.
And we do have copies of
Copies, I'll sign
your book?
the books.